bookshop. It's the bookshop. It's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It is Sam Feifel, your host of John Updike's Ghost, your favorite little podcast about reading, writing, literature, bookstores, all things awesome. And I am joined, as always, by my sister, the co-owner of the bookshop of Beverly Farms, and someone who looks great in pinstripes, Hannah Harlow. How are you doing today, Hannah?
Oh, so good. Thank you. Thank you for that intro. Makes me feel good.
Yeah, maybe that's not pinstripes. What do you really call that? It's like a red version of, I don't know. Pinstripes, I feel like, are oddly shaped. Those are, uniform.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like a candy striper in this shirt.
What are the blue and white striped pants I wear that are very light? I wear them in the summer. Not gingham, but like Southern suits are made out of them.
I know.
What's that called?
No, I'm having a moment now where I
can never remember the name of it because it's a weird thing. But anyway, that's what Hannah's wearing, not me. I'm not wearing that. That would be weird. We are here to talk about books. I've had my agenda is a little light. I've been very busy. I had a gig up in Millinocket, which involved me sleeping on the floor of a lean-to, which was very uncomfortable.
Oh, I was going to say, it looked really pretty.
Oh, it was spectacular and gorgeous, but it was not conducive to reading. And in general, I've been very busy. So actually, the only book that I have read in the last 2 weeks is David Nicholls' You Are Here, because it was at camp. And I was like, who's going to read this book? Hannah has left to hear for me. Let's see what it's all about. I've also been slogging my way through that, giant spaceship battle audiobook. I feel like it never ends. I feel like you can listen to it forever.
Okay.
So, but will you have anything on your agenda? Because we have another agenda item as well.
Yes, I've read 3 books, but one I'm going to save because it doesn't come out till November. So,
well, look at you, 3 books.
Yeah. I read Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín.
Oh, I didn't know you had
an older book. No, it's an older book.
It's an older book. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And The Life Impossible by Matt Haig, the Midnight Library author.
There's going to be a lot of buzz around that one. Why don't we start with what I wanted to start with, which is the Longlist for the National Book Award for Fiction was released this past week.
Yes, tell me your thoughts.
I would like to say that it makes us look very smart. Well, I mean, if you think the National Book Award for Fiction has any value, maybe it makes us look really dumb if you don't like the National Book Awards. But for instance, you might recall we were telling you, hey, this woman, Jessica Anthony from Maine, she's really smart and has written an amazing new book called The Most, and you should come see us talk to her about that book in our little bookshop. Remember that event that we held?
I remember it because it was a spectacular event.
It was. Maybe a little underattended, though.
Maybe a little underattended. Yeah. And especially in light of this new news, I think, I feel validated.
Right. Lo and behold, The Most has been longlisted for a National Book Award for Fiction. Holy smokes, as they say. I thought that it's an amazing thing for Jessica. She, I think she has done a great job of walking the line between hardcore literary fiction that, speaks to the canon and, does new and different. She wrote a whole book with no words in it. She has taken tons of chances, and I think she would tell you if you asked her, National Book Award, whatever, I write for myself. But I got to think she's a little bit gratified by being longlisted for the National Book Award, so I'm really happy.
I would think so.
Her. Yeah, it's going to feel good. I don't care how awesome you are.
I love, sometimes you see an author event and you're sort of like, I don't know, I feel like maybe they got lucky with this book, or there's not as much thought behind it as you want there to be, or, sometimes you're disappointed, whatever.
Right.
Not true. Jessica came and you're like, oh, wow, she's so smart and she's a true artist and she has thought about all these different things that I could never have seen except that she's talking about them or whatever.
That was what was most impressive about talking with her is like you'd ask a question that's a little bit of like a puffball, like, oh, were you expecting this kind of reaction?
Right.
And then, you know, boom, 15 minutes later, she's giving you like all this backstory on how her career has built and why, you know, she has gone in this direction and that direction. And, you know, the vagaries of why one book gets reviewed and one gets sold. And, you know, I just thought, you know, that was what you hit on right there is what it is for me, is that she never does anything like by chance. Everything's on purpose. And I just think, you know, to have that kind of vision and dedication is crazy good.
Totally. Yeah. So congrats to Jessica.
Myself.
I thought the rest of the list was like, you know, interesting. There were a couple of
well, there are other books that we really liked. I mean, obviously, Percival Everett's James, you were hot on from the jump.
Yeah, and that's not a surprise, you know, like...
Actually, I think it would have been shameful if it wasn't.
It would have been shameful.
That one like had to be on the list.
Yes, totally. And I think it'll be interesting to see if it makes the short list. I hope it does. I think that book is just really, really special and spectacular.
Carol Prentice just finished it. She really liked it.
Everybody really likes it. You can't not like it. And...
let's see. We were also I can't remember. Did you listen to, or maybe I just put it in as our audiobook of the week one time, Miranda July's All Fours. It was a little bit
half of that.
A little bit of a surprise to me. It did, you know, like I thought it's a little cultural phenomenon all of a sudden, which I didn't really see coming. But it didn't seem like the type of book that was National Book Award Longlist type of book. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, again, she is like an artist, right? And you read that book and it goes places you don't expect. Like I never knew what was going to happen next. To be honest, I didn't actually finish it.
Right.
It's
That's
very
what I remember, maybe. Yeah.
Weird, which I think a lot of people really love. I think it's saying some interesting things, or at least giving you an interesting look at, you know, women in middle age and like having kind of like a midlife crisis.
Right. Isn't it also a little bit porny? Isn't that?
It gets a little porny. I believe. I don't think I got to even like the real porny stuff. I think the end has like some intense sex scenes, but so
maybe that's why, you know, I feel like, you know, in today's, you know, puritanical day and age, you know, having
maybe that's a little shocking. I don't know.
You know, look what's going on.
Except that, like, you know, I bet I haven't read that part of the book, but like, you know, romance is really hot. A lot of these romance novels are very, very spicy.
That's true. Yes.
You know, so like, just because it's like a little bit more arty and literary, people are like, whoa. But
well, I know, but I think that's what's so funny about our current puritanical moment is because on one hand, you can find as much sex and depravity as you want, like at your fingertips. It's literally anywhere on your phone immediately. But in the popular discourse, in like art and literature, you actually see very little of it. Like it's kind of gone out. And there's even like whole communities of readers that are pertaining to be literary, and they're like, oh, why is this sex scene necessary? It's just to be titillating. It's not part of the book, blah, blah, blah. As though like we should lance all that stuff out of like artistic discussion and put it into the realm of these romances, which are just trash or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's crazy. Like, you know, literature is, you know, the human condition doesn't work without sex, and literature has always traveled in sex.
Yeah, which reminds me of, you know, when we talked to like Steve Almond on the podcast, and he was like, if you're not thinking about your character having sex, like you're not thinking about your character as a full person, right? Like everybody has sex.
People think about sex a lot, it seems like.
Yeah.
It's part of
I am also sort of gratified, weirdly, to see Creation Lake on there, because you were like,
you called that. You totally called that. I'm sorry, that book is not good. It's not a good book. I actually feel like I'm pretty good at figuring out like what like the literary people are going to think is good. I can't even figure that out, right? Like, so, you know, it doesn't have a plot that's interesting. It doesn't like move any like new ground. Like, you know, I'm sorry, like female spy is not like, this is not feminism, right? Like we've done female spy. Hey, Charlie's Angels, we're spies, guys. Like, I mean, like, you know, where I feel like there's this new feminist moment, like as though none of the feminine waves that happened were in like feminist wave -1, where like we're oh, hey, have you guys thought about maybe women are full people now? Like, it just occurred to me, like, maybe this is a thing, you know? And it's like they're trying to drag feminism out of the realm of like the weird feminists into popular discourse or something. Like, hey, Fox News viewers, have you thought about maybe women being full people? And I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. That book's not good. It was boring, is what it was.
I had somebody like pick
boring.
it up and they were like, oh, I love spy thrillers. I read a ton of spy thrillers. And I was like, I don't think
Don't read that.
that's going to be like satisfying for you.
There are no thrills. There's no thrills. Or maybe there's some thrills in the like last third that I could not make it to because it was so boring. If you want to know a lot about like, you know, Neanderthals, that book is for you. It like reads like a history text at some point. It's like, it's so dull. And actually I was talking to my buddy, Rick Wormwood, who
Yes.
was in a Columbia creative writing program with Rachel Kushner.
Oh,
And he says that he believes he is Rachel Kushner's most hated person. And so if you hate Rick Wormwood, you must be a bad writer. That's what I'm telling you.
okay. Amazing. Well,
What about the other ones?
let's-
Martyr?
Oh.
I mean, I knew Martyr was going to be on the list, even though I've never read it. Like,
I actually read the beginning of Martyr and it is spectacular.
Oh.
It's also an intense book and I didn't finish it, not because I didn't like it. it was one of those books where you start and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm like in the right headspace for this. Like I'm going to come back to it. And I unfortunately haven't come back to it yet, but in my head, it's one of those books. Like I'm going to go back to it
What
someday.
is it about? It's like,
It
who
is
is the martyr in question?
I mean, I don't know if I got far enough to know the martyr unless it's just the main character who's this
Right.
narrator who's a poet and has some mental health issues and lives in the middle of the country and has addiction issues and I think goes to meetings. It's like kind of as far as I got.
Right.
But
Right.
it's just like, it's one of those books where like each word is intentional and each sentence is kind of spectacular and you're like emotionally invested kind of immediately but it's intense.
What about Sam Sachs's You're Dead from McSweeney's? I think this is the only book on the list that isn't from one of the big heavyweights.
I think Norton has one book on the list.
Oh, we don't consider Norton a heavyweight? I thought they were kind of heavy.
Ghost Roots by Pemi Aguda is a Norton book, and Norton is an independent press. It's not one of the big five. So we do. I mean,
they're big though, right?
They're big. They're kind of what you would consider a mid-sized publisher, and there aren't that many mid-sized publishers anymore. They're kind of like actually the only ones. I don't know who else is even a mid-sized publisher anymore, but Norton is not one of the big five.
Okay,
so,
right. Not one of the big five. So okay, all right, but they're bigger than McSweeney's.
But yeah, McSweeney's is tiny and truly a small press. McSweeney's, it's like I have a email about this book that I like keep marking as unread, like, okay, remember to come back to this and like look at this book by Sam Sachs. But I haven't done that yet.
I mean, I love McSweeney's. Everything they do, I think, is kind of funny. Even the stuff that's like super weird. I don't know if people don't know, McSweeney's was started by David Eggers, who's also one of my favorite authors in general. Always writes good stuff, and he's always super supportive of the independent press. So we should be super supportive of McSweeney's and tell people that we will read this book. Figure out if it's good.
We're gonna try. We're gonna add it to the list.
Let's see what else is on there. Catalina.
Rejection. Catalina.
Rejection.
Sorry, we can do Catalina first. I actually read.
I think it's got a beautiful cover. That's all I know.
It has a beautiful cover. It's a very voicey novel. It's narrated by a young woman who is daughter. I think she's like a dreamer. I could be getting some of this wrong, and I apologize for what I'm getting wrong. But it has to do with being an immigrant, and there's maybe her parents are not documented, and so she's kind of this first generation, like, trying to make a success of herself. I think maybe she's going to Columbia or something. I read the first few pages. Got the vibes for it.
Carla Cornejo Villavicencio. That is a beautiful name.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a really beautiful, voicey book. So
And then last, we have two other ones we've not talked about. Do you know anything about Ghost Roots other than it being published by Norton?
I actually don't know
No,
anything
me
about
neither.
Ghost Roots.
I've never even seen that book, actually. It's the only one that I was like, I don't know that book at all. What about My Friends, Hisham Matar?
I believe we just sent this, or we sent this a little while ago to our mother, so we should ask her
That's
thoughts.
right. Yeah.
We've sold a few of these. I actually, don't know much about it. For those listening, we're just jumping in here. We didn't do obviously a lot of research except to be so excited about Jessica Anthony.
Come on now. And last but not least, Tony Tulathamut's Rejection.
So actually, this is the one I actually don't have any memory of seeing. I mean, I think I ordered it, but it's like one of those books that comes in and you're like, did I order this? I guess I did because it's here, but... And like, look at that cover. I'm sorry, that is a nothing cover. Like, it tells you
I know it's
nothing
just
about the book.
Yeah, it's just like amorphous blobs.
What am I supposed to make of that cover? I
don't know. It's a good question.
I don't know.
If I was going to rate the covers, I would say Jessica Anthony's cover is the best.
Yeah. Rejection is stories.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You can have short stories nominated in the long list? I thought there was a separate category for that.
No, it's just they just have fiction, which can be stories or novel.
Oh, wow. All right.
If we're rating covers, 100% the most is the best cover. Oh my God.
Really?
Look at these covers.
The cover is so bad. The Ghost Roots one is not good. The Creation Lake one looks fake. The Hisham Matar looks pretty good. The Catalina is beautiful. I love that.
Catalina is beautiful.
And the James tells you what you need to know.
Yeah.
Actually, I like the Martyr cover. That Martyr cover sticks out to me every time.
No, the Martyr cover I think is good.
Yeah.
Just the fact that it has an exclamation point there, you're like...
Yeah, like what?
Yeah.
All right, so...
Let's talk about the books we actually read.
A little display of these National Book Awards, I'm sure, where you can come and buy them and get into that national discourse about some of the best books that are out there right now. Speaking of books that we have read, yes, what would you like to say about which book first?
Oh, let's talk about the Matt Haig book, The Life Impossible.
People are going to want to know about this book.
I think people are going to want to know about it. It was number one on the indie bestseller list last week, which is not really that surprising. So for people who maybe don't know, Matt Haig wrote The Midnight Library, which has been on the bestseller list for like years.
Which is about a woman who kills herself and then winds up in the middle of like dreamland and something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, she ends up in this library after attempting suicide where she can pick any book off the shelf and it'll show her like an alternate life that she would have lived or whatever.
Yes, and people found that uplifting.
Yes. And, I think if you liked The Midnight Library, you're going to like The Life Impossible.
Is this also meant to be like soul and nourishing?
It is. It is about a 72-year-old woman who has just lost her husband. And when her son was 12, she lost her son. So she's been sort of living for a long time in this like suspended state of grief. And then she loses her husband and she basically has, it's called like anhedonia. Like she has not felt anything. She doesn't feel joy. She doesn't feel sorrow. She's just been in sort of this like unfeeling state of being. And at the beginning of the book, this former colleague who she hasn't seen or spoken to in like 30 years because she moved to Ibiza, leaves her, like disappears, is presumed dead. And so in her will, she has left the main character her house on Ibiza. So this woman decides,
let's go to Ibiza.
Let's go check it out.
Yeah, I'm going.
And she gets there and like a whole bunch of like wild things happen that you won't be able to believe.
Like she goes to raves with P. Diddy.
She goes to a rave.
There you go. Okay.
And so there's a magic in the book. There are
Mm.
actually aliens in the book. I mean, this is sort of my
Aliens?
problem. Like, I was like, sort of like, I wish it had just been sort of unexplained magic, but they were like, it's aliens. So there's this magic light under the ocean, kind of off the coast of Ibiza.
Mm.
And it kind of chooses certain people to show itself to, and then they get these magical powers.
Oh, okay.
So our main character ends up with these magical powers.
And that's
And
how
she has
Shakira got to be such a good dancer.
Yes. Yes. And, she has to use her magical powers for good. But like the main thing is it like allows her to feel again. She feels joy. She, feels sorrow. She is able to connect with people again. And so it is all about like kind of learning to love life and this planet. And like,
is the light like a metaphor for faith or spirituality or something, right? Like we have to find some meaning outside of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. Yeah, so there's like a little bit of like ridiculousness that you just have to go with,
right?
Which is fine. But I think there are a lot of like uplifting moments, and this idea of like it's never too late to live,
re-engage with life. Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
and like make connections with people, and there is. So I listened to the audiobook, which you had recommended in the newsletter,
right?
And in it, you mentioned that the narrator is one of the actresses from Ab Fab.
Yes.
Which I hadn't realized.
Yes. Well, isn't that cool? Was she great?
So cool. She was so great.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That show is like revelatory. If you don't know Absolutely Fabulous, you got to go find it and watch it. It's the funniest show I've ever seen in my life. And it actually was great because I was like, I always do that. I look through all the new audiobooks to like see which ones are like cool looking to make the audiobook of the week. And I was like, oh, who's this narrator? That name sounds familiar. And I click through and it's like immediately I see the picture and it's Patsy. I'm like, oh my God, it's Patsy. It's amazing.
So once you had said that, then I was listening and I was able to picture her, and it just made it that much better. And
she's like got a martini in her hand and her lipstick's all smeared.
But so there's this one character named Alberto who he's super annoying, but you come to love him. And her accent for him is so enjoyable. It's like a little bit like Gru from, Despicable Me or whatever.
Yeah, Despicable Me.
Not Indespicable, Despicable Me. And it's so cute. And then so you're just like, now I love this guy and the accent's amazing. So it's an enjoyable audiobook.
What's her name? Do you have it right there? What's Patsy's real name? I'm spacing on her name.
Somebody, you can Google it.
She's Google it. Google Patsy from Absolutely Fabulous. She is the narrator of, what is it? A Life Impossible? Right?
The Life Impossible.
The Life Impossible. I'm so happy that ended up being good. So I have two addendums to that. One is, speaking of lights in the water, right?
Yes.
I actually finished The Light Pirate. That's actually something other that I read this last 2 weeks. I hadn't finished The Light Pirate. Remember, I was like, I thought it was going to be more like magical. The second half is much more magical. The second half the second half is kind of Kevin Costner and Waterworld. Basically, so there's like 3 different time jumps. And actually, I really like that book. I think it's really well done because
I read the beginning. I don't know if I mentioned this before.
Right.
I read the beginning and I was like, I'm kind of bored. I don't know what's happening.
It is kind of boring, right? So, but I think that's actually why I like it, is that there is this transition from like the mendacity of everyday right now life, where we're sort of semi-dealing with like climate disaster, but we're like, oh yeah, we had a flood for a couple of days, but back to normal, right? And then it kind of goes, and then there's another time, then there's a time jump, right? And it's like, oh, society's falling apart. They just said that they're not going to support Miami-Dade County anymore, right? And that's kind of where I was. And so I didn't know there was going to be another, but then there's another time jump where we are in like fully flooded Florida and people live on the ocean, and they have like, there's all this cool stuff about how they've created new community. And this woman has been living by herself for like 10 years or something.
Oh, wow.
And then she kind of is terrified of rediscovering community because people are scary, but then she does find a little pod again, and it ends with hope, like you were predicting. But the hope is, it ends with hope, but the hope is like, oh, maybe we'll be able to figure out a way to sort of keep like 10 people alive.
All right.
It's like, this doesn't work at scale here, guys. Like, I guess it's hopeful. We've created a new community of 10 people. Good job. Unfortunately, we have 300 million to deal with here in the United States, but
This has been my revelation though recently of like, if you stick with a book, generally it ends up being enjoyable, and sometimes you just have to stick with it longer than others. And
I
like,
was actually having
truly knowing when to quit has been kind of my dilemma these days, because I'm like, people are saying good things about this. I'm super bored. It must get good at some point. And then like sometimes you have to stick with it for a long time when you have this like, oh wow, this is really good.
I had a similar experience. I was going to read that book all the way through because I just wanted to know what it was about.
Yeah.
I was going to power through regardless, but I think the setup is really important. The boredom is important to the end, because it makes the second part seem as just as mundane in some way. This is how we live now, right? This is how we lived then. It was pretty interesting. Also, she kills off a lot of people that I didn't see. I was like, oh, that person's dead. Wow, good. Cool.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, so I read your David Nicholls book.
What did you think?
I mean, it really is a straight romance for boys, just like we were saying,
Yes.
And I don't know why I say for boys, because it's not really. Actually, I came around to the end. I actually didn't think the dude perspective was particularly well represented, despite the fact that David is a dude.
Yeah, interesting. Because there were certain points where I was like, I don't know about you writing this female character, but like, okay, I'll go.
I actually, so in the end, I thought both characters were cartoonish, and I was fine with that, right? We've talked about how, it's fine to have, and so it was, and it does remind me of Nick Hornby stuff, right? But I think Nick Hornby is a level up, right? I think he allows his characters to be more interestingly flawed. Right, like the flaws that these characters had seemed like really cliche flaws, and it was just like it felt a little. I thought that all this, there's a lot of stuff I like about it. I'm not like ripping on it or whatever. Like, I thought the setup was really good. I loved the whole, like, the architecture of the walk across England is great.
It is great. Yeah.
It allows him to do like all these cool things, when the beginning and the end are going to be, and like. You're not, like you said, like you're not really worried about how they're going to get together or when they're going to get together. It's like, okay, let's see how he, puts these puzzle pieces together. It's interesting. Yeah. And I thought he did a good job. Like, like it wasn't, he kept me guessing a little bit. But like, for instance, like there's this guy's got all this trauma because he got his ass kicked or whatever,
Yes.
And like, I thought there was just so much more he could do with that. And he didn't give us like enough of the interior monologue about what that was like, and like, I don't think he really could empathize with what that's like. I think the author couldn't actually put themselves in the shoes. David, like, I'm sorry, like it's way worse than, it seemed in the book. And similarly, like, I mean, I guess it kind of ruins it. I won't, but the reveal from the ex-wife, it was presented almost like a womp womp, but I was like, oh my God, I would be so devastated. Like, like the infinite amount of devastation, like that is like, cool. Right. And I think the ex-wife was presented as like, oh, she's just moving on with her life. But I was like, oh, wow, that's fucking cruel. Like that is a very mean thing to do to a person that you just did, Yeah. It was kind of presented as, oh gosh,
Too bad. Yeah.
I was just like, whoa, And I think it didn't that's what I think is like, I think it didn't give the dude enough credit for having an interior life, It is like, oh, dudes are just shrug things off and move on and keep walking.
Interesting,
and right. Like, no, dudes have feelings too, and that would rock that dude, Like, and he was like sad, but
he was rocked. He was kind of rocked,
but he was embarrassed sad, right? He was like, I can't believe I bought champagne, like, no, dude, I wouldn't. The champagne is the least of the things I'm thinking.
Yeah, that was brutal.
But so I just felt like it was. I think if people like David Nicholls. Nick Hornby's stuff is just like one level more like sophisticated, but I think
that's fair.
Which is not, it's not a contest or anything, but like,
And
You
like
know?
maybe, right, like this.
I just think Nick does a great job of, you know, like I feel like dudes aren't allowed to have feelings in books, you know, and I think
Yeah.
he is some of the best, and the British for some reason seem to do it well. He's one of the best at like, hey, dudes are people too, you know.
Right. Cool. Well, I have an Irish book to talk about, and
Yeah,
that's
I read Columns. Like, what did I read not that
I
long
don't
ago?
know. I mean, Long Island is the newest book that he has out, and it's a continuation of Brooklyn. So everyone kept being like, "Have you read Long Island?" And I was like, "Well, no, because I haven't read Brooklyn, and I felt
Right.
like I wanted to read that first." So Brooklyn, and it was made into a movie that people recommended too. They said it was actually a really well done adaptation. So I think I'll watch that at some
Right.
point. But Brooklyn is about a young woman in Ireland, kind of post-war, and there aren't a lot of jobs. Her sister has a job. All of her brothers have moved to England to find work, and so she and her sister are at home with her mom. But there's like really no work for her, and the local priest who now lives in Brooklyn kind of schemes with the mom, and like they get the girl over to America where there's a job lined up, there's an apartment lined up, and you just kind of go, it's like I don't know, to be honest, it's it's one of those books that's like actually kind of boring, but I think you're just like, you end up loving the girl, and she's kind of an interesting character. I mean, I found her to be very quiet, where like I just feel like you don't hear from her a lot. Like she has a lot of like internal thoughts happening throughout the book, but like
Yeah.
she doesn't seem to like speak up that much. And she has interesting takes on like what's happening and like what she wants and her relationships with other people, like with the other boarders. She's just kind of like, yeah, all these girls are like kind of ridiculous. Which I found, again, like, because it was written by a man, I was like, is this an interesting take? Because this guy really doesn't understand how women think? Or is it an interesting take, just because like she is an interesting character and this is maybe how someone newly arrived in America would feel? Like, I don't know. People were like, you're going to freaking love this book. Like, there's a lot of love for this book. And I thought it was okay. Like,
well, he's
it's
written
really
a
well
ton
written.
of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
he's got a million books.
I just felt like I didn't get it. And I was like, what am I missing? And then there is something that happens kind of like 3/4 of the way through the book where all of a sudden I was like super invested. So again, I was like, is this just a book where like it
Slow
just takes a
burn.
while to get into it? It's a slow burn. And the end, the end just gets so much better because there does end up being like kind of a love triangle situation happening. And, she does in the end have to make a choice. And like that was good. It's a real slow burn.
Huh. Well, he's one of those authors where like I know his name and I just went and looked and I have not read a single thing he's ever written.
I think that's the first thing I've read.
First,
I
was
don't
like,
think
I
I've
must
read
have
it
read
before.
something, but I don't recall any of these books that I'm looking at.
Yeah, so now I have Long Island like ready to go if I want to, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
Point. Yeah.
but like, and I guess I was reading it thinking, why do people love this book? Which is a totally different reading experience. And I think it does color it. Like, I think if I had come to it, early on before, like maybe I would have loved it too. But I think I read it thinking like, wait a sec, what is it about this book? Like, I'm not totally understanding why everyone loves it.
Yeah. It's interesting. In general, I don't like historical fiction. Like I'm not, the whole like, oh, I'm going to place it in this setting and teach you about history at the same time. Like,
yeah,
I always feel like they're too didactic and that they often like ignore the story to tell you these things that they want you to know about that time in history.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually makes me remember, Hannah, this is how busy I've been. I actually read a whole other book in this 2-week period that I completely forgot about because I read it in one day up at camp.
Okay. What was it?
It's that Naomi Hirahara book, Clark in Division. Do you know that book?
Yeah, it's a mystery.
Yeah, it's about and so it made me think of it because it's historical fiction.
Right.
It's is set in Chicago right after the Japanese internment camps. So it's this Japanese family. They were, middle class. The father was the manager of a, produce store in California, and they were, just living their life, being normal Californians, middle class people. War starts. Basically, they rounded up every Japanese person in the western part of the United States and put them in these internment camps, which I think people know sort of, logically, but I think a lot of people just sort of memory hold that, like, oh yeah, we had internment camps, whatever.
Right. Abstractly.
Yeah. And so then they would release like these non-threatening members of the camps out into the middle part of America, where like, because of geography, I guess they can't help the Japanese, right? The whole, like, all of it makes the United States look reprehensible, right? But so then at the same time, she set up this murder mystery where her sister, when, the main character is the younger sister of this woman, Rose, and she tells it in the first person. And so she's investigating how, the family is coming to join Rose, who's been sent to head to Chicago. Rose dies on the train tracks, hits by a subway car, right like the night before they get there. And the police say it's suicide, and the sister doesn't believe it's suicide. And so the whole book is this, investigation of that.
Cool.
And despite what I just said about not liking historical fiction, I actually learned a lot about the Japanese community in Chicago in the late 40s and early 50s because of this relocation program. And actually, I was interested in it mostly because I like Japanese culture in general. So it's pegged as like this great mystery, and I would say that is overstating matters. But I think it's a cool family drama. Like, you do have to wait till the last couple of pages to figure out what happened.
Right.
But like, yeah, I don't think it's like, people who love crime dramas aren't going to like it. It's more for people who love family dramas.
Okay. Interesting.
In my mind. But I thought it was actually really good. I can't believe I completely forgot that I read it.
Yeah. Well, I write everything down so that I don't forget.
All
Wait,
right.
did you have another book, though?
No, those are my two. Yeah.
Okay. And I talked about my two. So I guess that's it.
That's it? No, you have one other book. Brooklyn and...
The Life Impossible, which we talked about.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Maybe I'm doing too much. I don't know.
It's like actually a really busy time.
Yes.
I'm actually in the store and nobody has come in yet today. It is 9 a.m.
Don't tell anybody.
But part of the problem is that the road out front is being worked on. So I don't even know if you can drive down that street. It's not good for us. But it's supposed to be over within 10 days, fingers crossed. Oak Street's kind of open. Hopefully you can still get here. And
so maybe you should order something online to help us out. I don't know. I'm mildly distracted. So you have the road being constructed. My house is currently being constructed on. So while I'm trying to do this, all I can hear is people going bang, 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 bang on the outside of my house.
Yeah,
so,
the big dump trucks have just arrived out front, so it's getting quite noisy in here as well.
All right. So let's remind people to come and join us at the Boozy Book Fair at the True North Brewery on October 4th at 4 o'clock. Have a pint. Buy a book, maybe get some stickers, whatever it is that you want to do. Hannah's got a whole, I don't know, what do you call it? A cavalcade of awesome books. What is it, like a Murder of Crows and a collection of awesome books? I don't know.
Yes. Okay.
Collection. That's boring. Anyway, we will see you at the Boozy Book Fair if we don't see you somewhere else first. Otherwise, have a great couple weeks of reading and being awesome.